Coming up next, an interview with two Rock and Roll Hall of Famers on a historic hit that defined its time probably as well as any song. They were part of a supergroup, and at the time, nobody was aware that it was a supergroup. This rookie band actually recorded this classic secretly, under their producers' noses, because they wouldn't allow the band to play together. They've been recording them separately and I guess combining the tracks into one mono track, and it made their sound really weak and tinny. Ironically, one of the band members would spend his career lashing out at advertisements that used rock music and the musicians that allowed them to do it. And years later, this song would be used in a beer commercial. It's kind of funny. This song was actually written in a 10-minute car ride after the singer had witnessed something very troubling. And originally, the song didn't even make it onto the debut album it was cut for. But after it was an accidental hit, they added it onto second pressing. The interviews for this historic song, you gotta see this. It's coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you love the greatest music of the rock and roll era, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the classics, you're gonna love this channel. Make sure to subscribe below right now to be a part of our community. Check the bell. Click the notification button so you always know when our interviews are coming. Also, check us out on Patreon and our merch below. That helps us keep it a daily channel. Yeah, I have to say, I feel extremely fortunate, extremely blessed to be able to do what I do. It's been a dream come true to have interviewed some of the greatest artists in history about the songs that have been the backbone of my life and so many lives. Every once in a while, though, I have a pinch me moment that goes beyond interviewing an artist about one of their creations. I mean, there are definitely levels to what I do, and this next story is at the highest echelons of my experiences. When you get to talk to a legend about composing one of the songs that changed the social context of our existence, it's just something really special. Now, some may think I'm spewing hyperbole. I'm not. This is a song that my dad showed me when I was really young. He told me about what it meant to him, how it changed the way that he looked at the world when he was coming of age in the latter part of the 60s. The song I'm talking about here is For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield. And it's undoubtedly a definitive song of one of music's greatest years, 1967. A year that had the Beatles releasing what many consider to be the greatest album of all time, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. You know, the Doors released their debut album then. They did not acquiesce to Ed Sullivan's request to change the lyrics to Light My Fire that year. Girl, we couldn't get much higher. Aretha Franklin recorded Respect. Jimi Hendrix released Are You Experienced? It was the year of the Monterey Pop Festival. Otis Redding recorded Sitting on the Dock of the Bay. Sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. And of course would tragically pass away a few weeks later, the victim of a plane crash. The Who released Sell Out. I could see for miles and miles. I could see for... So many other incredible songs and albums released during this time. This might be the most game-changing song of the year. This song was released at the very end of 1966, December 23rd to be exact, but it had its biggest impact in 1967. Considered one of the greatest protest songs ever, although many people mistake this song for having been written about the Kent State shootings. But that tragedy happened in 1970, a full 3 years after For What It's Worth was actually recorded. Actually, Stephen Stills, who wrote and sang the song, would later form Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Later add Neil Young, who would write Ohio about Kent State while in the groups. So I was saying at the beginning of this, For What It's Worth is a golden song from the golden era. And it has a special place in my heart. I was flabbergasted when I had a chance to talk to the Stephen Stills at his own home about this song. And I might add, I spoke with him while sitting at a wooden stool you'll see in the interview. It's the same wooden stool that Crosby, Stills, and Nash sat on at Woodstock. It's kind of freaking out, to be honest with you.
You are mine, you are what you are.
I was, of course, most excited to tell my dad. After all, he was the one who raised me on their music. When I got to share this video with my dad just a short time before he passed away, he told me it was his favorite song story that I'd ever done. And he was really proud of my work. And that made it even more special in my heart. That's the magic of music. Songs are a thread, a through line that connect us all together as a human family. My dad first showed me the song, and he shared his life experience with me about this song. And then Stephen Stills, of course, shared his creation experience with me. And then I shared that with my dad. And now we'll share it with this community, and the beat goes on and on and on and on. It's just amazing. The story that Stephen Stills shares is amazing. And as an added bonus, we also have an interview with Ritchie Furay, another founding member of not only Buffalo Springfield, but also helped form Poco, one of the pioneers of country rock before the Eagles.
Well, there's just a little bit of magic in the country music we're singing.
I mean, like I said earlier, this is a band, it was a supergroup, and they didn't even know it. I mean, they not only had Stephen Stills, who would go on to form Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and later Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, but also featured the great Neil Young, as well as Ritchie Furay and Jimmy Messina, who would both form Poco. But then Messina was part of one of the biggest duos in Loggins and Messina. To be accurate, though, Messina was an engineer for the group early on. He only took over when Bruce Palmer left during the final album. So he wasn't there during the first album. But to have that many icons in a band is pretty remarkable. Like I said, a supergroup that neither us or the band themselves realized until much later. Contrary to popular belief, I said before it wasn't about Kent State. Some people mistake it for that. It's also, it was not motivated at first by the Vietnam War. Stephen Stills will tell the real instigator of this next, but the band recorded this classic in secret. They refused to involve their producers, Brian Stone and Charles Green. The band just wasn't happy with the way that the two men had engineered the album up to that point. They had insisted that the young band record their parts all, separately, and then put them together later into mono tracks. And that made their sound really weak, really tinny, really small. So they did this one their way, and it became a smash. It was so unexpected that the first pressings of the album didn't even have the song on it. They later added it. They replaced Baby Don't Scold Me. That's what they replaced.
You got eyes.
Original band member Neil Young, he's been famous in the past for bashing artists who let advertisers or commercials use their music to sell a product. I mean, he even did a song about it in the 80s, This Note's for You.
Like a joke. This note's for you.
Ironically, in the 90s, Miller Beer used this in their ad. Kind of a strange choice for a beer commercial. An anti-establishment protest song. Well, they cut around some of the lyrics. I wonder what Neil thought of that. Of course, Stephen Stills wrote the song, but Neil Young did add that perfect guitar harmonic to it. Fascinating stuff. So let's get into it with Stephen Stills and Ritchie Furay. This is a can't miss for sure. As we get into this interview, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. Speaking of selling stuff. You know what? These are the glasses I always wear. I just got 5 new pair. The cost was mind-blowing to me. Up to 80% off regular retail prices. That means you could get like 3 or 4 pair for what you would normally pay for just one. You design them and you can try them on virtually before you purchase them. Savings are unbelievable, especially during this time of inflation and other things. Click on the info button up here or go to our link below to get the best deals. Here's a story of For What It's Worth. Buffalo Springfield, the self-titled, recording it with Neil and with Stephen played the Troubadour. You guys played the Whiskey. I believe
Mainly it was the Whiskey.
You were the house band.
We were the house band.
The Whiskey.
Swapping out with the Doors and Leaves and Love and bunch of bands. Yeah.
All those great bands from the 60s. I mean, in my opinion, the 60s, greatest decade in the history.
Yeah,
of
I
music.
really feel blessed, man, to have been able to be a part of that time.
Part of
yeah,
that. Absolutely, man. For what it's worth, a lot of people misunderstand that you didn't write that as a straight up protest song for the war. It wasn't a protest of the Vietnam War. It's about Sunset Strip. Tell us the story behind that.
Actually, it's both. I had this running around in my head to write a shout out to the boys on the line, you know, that were being spat at and stuff. Because I went to military school. I didn't quite hold with that. I mean, just because the command authority has got their head up their ass doesn't mean that the guys that got to follow orders and go out in the jungle, they were starting to figure it out too. But I was living out in Topanga. I went into town and we went over the hill, and, you know, from the valley side, you go over Laurel Canyon and you come down on to Crescent Heights. And there was this triangle, and there was a little house there and a bar called Pandora's Box. And they were having a funeral for it. Now, that was something I knew something about, being from the French Quarter. So there were people spilling into the streets. Now, they have a law in Los Angeles about obstructing a public thoroughfare. So the cops, you know, roll up on it. And the next thing you know, the mayor has gone completely ape, and the chief of police, and they have a bunch of riot police in full Macedonian battle array lining up on one side of the street. And all the kids are going, yay, and then kids start, you know, teasing the cops. So they start doing the, you know, like that movie Zulu, you know. I looked down upon the scene and I said, turn the car around. I wasn't driving, a friend of mine was driving. He said, why? Because there's nothing good gonna happen down there.
1,000 people in the street.
The kids were all hanging out down there. I wasn't with Stephen, but he observed, you know, hey, there's something happening here.
Something happening here. What it is.
That's what it is, exactly. I mean, it's just how it came down, yeah.
That's what he said. He said, I was writing exactly what was happening and on the way to go get my guitar, because he said, we don't want to go back there because nothing good's going to come out of being back there.
Yeah.
Step out of line, the man come and take you away.
We turned around and went back to Topanga to get my guitar, and I kind of had the words written half in my head as we were driving out, and I wrote this song in a much shorter time than it takes to tell the story. Basically, I wrote down the words that had come to my head to the slick that I'd been fooling with.
There's a man with a gun over there. I tell him.
If you don't mind, take us through the composition of the song. When you were writing it, so you went and grabbed your guitar because you had the lyrics in your mind.
Yeah.
And you knew what you wanted. How did you come up with those chords?
Well, that's Neil. To me, that's integral to the record.
Yeah.
But the song can be played really simply like. Okay, that's the song. This. That was something that just occurred to Neil on the spot.
As you were recording it?
Yeah, I mean, that's really cool. But we never discussed whether to put it on the on beat. And he was always fiddling around and coming up with this cool songs. He's kind of savant that way. He's still doing it.
Show me, show me.
The song title, For What It's Worth, tell us that story, because there's always been the urban legend about handing the tape to Ahmet Ertegun, and you said...
For What It's Worth, here's a new song. There's something happening here, which would be the obvious title, or Stop Children, What's That Sound, or Look What's Going, you know, just nothing ever lent it to a title.
Ahmet Ertegun, who was the president of Atlantic Records, came out to LA to hear what kind of songs we had for another album. They were ready to go. They played some songs, so I played some songs, Stephen played some songs, and as we're packing up our instruments, I can hear Stephen right now say, oh, I got another one for what it's worth. That was it.
That's one of my favorite rock and roll stories ever. For What It's Worth wasn't even on the first pressing of this.
There's a song called Baby Don't Scold Me.
Baby, don't scold me. You see, I'm not.
We stopped the album. We took off one of my other songs to put For What It's Worth on.
You know, in the song, basically, man, I was Bluebird, Rock and Roll Woman. I was way past that song when he played it. You know, I thought, well, that's a nice little folk song you got there, Stephen. But Ahmed said, no, man, we gotta release that now.
And the next thing you know, it's like number 7 in the country.
And really, if you think about the 60s, if there were a song that represented the 60s, I mean, maybe Hey Jude.
Hey Jude, don't make it bad.
For What It's Worth.
Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Turn, Turn, Turn.
There is a season, turn, turn, turn.
I mean, those are the songs that take you to that moment, for me.
I was thinking of Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man.
Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song for me.
Well, I don't really look to the charts except to glance at them. The way I knew it was, I picked up a kid hitchhiking, and it came on the radio.
There's battle lines being drawn, and nobody's right.
And I know that our pictures hadn't been, we didn't have a billboard yet or anything. And what do you think of this song? Yeah, it's pretty cool. I love that band. I went and saw him, and he doesn't recognize. So what do you think of that song? And, I'm getting kind of, actually, to be honest, it's like, it's been on for a month. I'm getting sick of it. That's when I knew I had a hit.
Young people speak in their minds.
Well, of course, since then, it's one of the most covered songs. I mean, Staple Singers.
What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Cher.
Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Ann Wilson, A Heart.
Paranoia strikes deep.
Rush, it's like, that's very cool to me. We always thought that was cool.
Young people speak in their minds.
What'd you think about when Ozzy Osbourne covered it?
All I know is that every time I see that thing, it comes up and asks for permission because I've got to give it. There's 4 freaking publishers on there, and I don't understand. And one by one, I've paid them off and gotten it back. I think I get it back into my control in another couple of years.
It's been referenced in pop culture, too, on The Muppet Show, Forrest Gump.
Now, that was cool.
This one day, we was out walking like always, and then...
And it's used in a couple of places. But there was even a beer commercial, which I got unending teasing from Neil.
Do you remember the first time that you heard your song on the radio with Buffalo Springfield? Do you remember that moment?
It was nothing like the Tom Hanks movie. There was nothing.
Nothing You Do?
This is Erie Zone.
Well, it's nothing. There was no girl. There was no screaming. There was, oh, I heard the song on the radio. Oh, there it is.
Paranoia strikes deep.
And we heard it and we went, wow, it sounds too compressed.
Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop.
So an all-star version of For What It's Worth with Tom Petty and other great ones was played at Buffalo Springfield's induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1997. Of course, Stephen Stills has been inducted twice. Neil Young actually didn't attend the event when Buffalo Springfield got put in. He got put in 3 times. Leave us a comment about this masterwork of the 60s. What are your thoughts on this song and about Buffalo Springfield and Stephen Stills? What are your memories of hearing it for the first time? What does the song mean to you, the lyrics? Do you have a special connection to it? Let's talk about it below. We invite you to check us out on Patreon. Check out our merch as well. Help us keep the music alive. That's what it's all about. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friend.